is the fact that COVID has had a huge, huge impact on women on a ground level, but on a higher level and globally. And I would like to see an environment and a place in the future that, because of COVID, women are not left behind, whether they're in organisations or whether they are there as parliamentarians or in politics. We must not let COVID leave women behind. That's my special message.
And we definitely won't. Let's fight for that. So let me just share this video from Petra from Belgium. I think she touches on a lot of the points we'll discuss, and we'll get right ahead with the discussion after. Please let me know if you can hear it. I'm trying to make Zoom work.
Feminism is about redressing the power imbalance between men and women and emancipating women economically, politically, socially, and personally. And that's the kind of feminism I stand up for as a person and as a Deputy Prime Minister in the Belgian government. This pandemic, which at first we called a great leveler, turns out in reality to have underscored and reinforced some age-old stereotypes in our society. Worldwide, women have suffered increased domestic violence. They have shouldered the lion's share of the domestic burden, in particular childcare, and they are by far the majority among the lowest paid workers in our care services. Paid and unpaid care are kept afloat by women, and let's not underestimate the serious financial consequences that this has, for instance, for single mothers or women from ethnic minorities. What this tells me is that we sadly still need Women's Day even today. The world I want to fight for is a world in which every man, every woman, and every person who doesn't choose to be defined in those terms can enjoy equal opportunities and can be treated equally in society. That's not a fight I'm going to be able to fight alone. It's a challenge for all of us. We can demolish these barriers together and ensure equal life chances for all. I want to inspire women, particularly young women, to believe in themselves, and I urge them, you, to believe in your ability to make your dreams come true. However big that dream may look, however out of reach that ambition seems, you'll never know if you can get there unless you try. Believe in yourself is so important. I know this from experience. When I was a teaching professor, young, ambitious male students would knock on my door and they would say, "Professor, I'm going to do a PhD. What's the next step?" They did not ask, "Can I? Am I good enough? Will I succeed?" Women rarely knocked on my door. I had to go looking for them, seek them out and say, "You're a person with the right abilities. I see so much talent in you. Why don't you consider going for a PhD?" And more often than not, I'd get the response, "Oh, I don't know, is that really for me? Will I be able to handle it?" I promise you, that's not a question most men ask themselves. So I'm saying to all women, believe in yourself, and let's break these barriers together, the ones in society as well as the ones in our own heads. And let us, as a society, do everything we can to make sure people, regardless of gender, have the chance to combine work and family, or care for a loved one or a relative in a fulfilling way, without taboos, so that men too can take up their equal share of caring. We have been celebrating Women's Day for 110 years. Every year we celebrate, hoping that the next year will be a true celebration of equality for everyone.
So this was a message by Petra de Sutter, who was, just like Peneza, one of the first endorsers of our Run Like a Woman campaign. She unfortunately couldn't join today, but I wanted to showcase this to get started with this conversation. And to start it in a positive way, I would like to start maybe with Peneza this time, asking you, what are some of the biggest victories you have witnessed this year in your community when it comes to equality? So obviously we have two speakers from very different communities, the UK and Tanzania, and we really want to hear the differences and the happy achievements that have occurred.
Okay, I'll just love to talk about more on the political participation first, that is happening within the country. And within Tanzania, it is provided within the constitution of the Republic of Tanzania that the parliament has to have 30% of the women in the house. And there are a number of laws that were also created in the previous parliament, which stipulate that in various positions, like in the boards and all that, women should also be represented. But in all that cause, there's something that we forget to track. We're pushing hard for women to be represented in parliament, in decision making, which is very important. Women should be at the table, but we're waiting for women whom we're meeting after the finished product, and we're leaving a lot of women who are not being taken care of, women who are not being supported by the budgets within the country, women that are not being helped within their communities to actually build up from the local levels, to actually participate, to actually have the power to engage. So we tend to find women who are already empowered, women who are already exposed. Then they get into politics and all. Then we have a few number of women who keep up the fight, women who keep up pushing for gender equality. So one of the most important thing, I think, as Tanzania now, and much as I'm not in parliament, but I'm trying to push within the community, is the budget tracking. How are women being catered for within the budget lines within the country? And this should be happening from the planning itself and to the implementation. When we talk about agriculture, how many women can we track that have been helped, that have been empowered within the agricultural sector? So we can have women who are doing agriculture empowered, women who can form their own unions, women who can be leaders of the unions, of the agricultural unions in their areas. If we are talking of women entrepreneurs, then the budget itself has to support women at the grassroots, who can, then they'll be empowered economically, they'll be empowered by the knowledge and the kind of education that they get, that on a later note provides them leadership positions. So if it means being at the table, it just doesn't mean being in parliament. It means being at the table in various decision makings that touch the lives of these women. So we should help them in various fields in which they are, in order to actually have them in all fields, so that if we're speaking of women at the table, the agricultural part is being taken care of, politics is being taken care of, entrepreneurs is being taken care of, the industrial part is being taken care of, every part, they're full of women, and not just seeing them as figures just at the political level without having them at the grassroots.
No, thank you. We do need women in every single aspect of leadership in society, everywhere across the world. Rabina, do you want to jump on here on the biggest victories you've noticed or the key developments in your community?
Yes, definitely. I think I'll start with something really important to me, which is on the 29th of May 2020, we actually celebrated the 50th anniversary of equal pay in this country. And that's something very important to us as women globally. The East End has a really big history of fighting for women to have the right to vote. So if we look at history in the UK, in the late 1800s to the early 1900s, women suffragettes were fighting, first of all, for the right to pay, to make sure that they had a voice in Parliament, and equality at work. And we are still fighting for those three things even now, over 100 years later. So in some ways, that victory is bittersweet, because 50 years on, women are still fighting for that equal pay, even though the Equality Act came into place. And I know, I think, Colombo, you read an article last year that I wrote about equality, pay equality. And one of the reasons I wrote that, and I bring it down to a community level, is that there was a group of women who worked as teaching assistants in a school, and they had left school and got this job in a school when they were aged 16. There were about 4 or 5 of them. It was their one and only job, and they worked in this school for 25 years. And between them, all of them, I think it came up to about 110 years between the 5 of them. When this school shut down, these women received a severance pay of pittance, I would say to you. And the reason why they got that pay was because the law states that you will only get a redundancy pay based on your hours. Now, some of these women began as full-time when they first got the job. They began part-time when they had their families and children and the caring responsibility took over. We know that women are predominantly the caregivers in families. We know that they get unpaid and paid care for, and that still needs to be recognised. But when these women got that redundancy pay, it was heartbreaking for them, because all those years that they had worked, they got nothing. And the victory I want to come to is that they campaigned for a whole year and they got something back in return, because they challenged the system by which the consultation process took place, and they want something back. And for them at that level, having someone to hold their hand, build that courage, build that sense of empowerment is fundamental of women having the right to be able to talk about their feelings, be able to advocate for themselves, and to be able to progress in society. So that's on a lower scale. And finally, my own personal view is that in the COVID era, I have seen so many women in the front line. We should be celebrating what they have done and sacrificed, not just in the UK, but globally, because women in the front line tend to be in the healthcare sector. They have suffered the most. And on this day, let's pay tribute to all the women who have not only sacrificed with their lives, with their families, the hours that they have put in. It's this moment for them, I think.
I couldn't agree more. And I think, not only in the healthcare system, but I was looking today, reading a few articles on the struggles in Myanmar and Belarus, and some of the leaders of the revolutions, the resistance movement for freedom and democracy are women, and they really have been on the forefront as well. So I think 2020 and the beginning of 2021 have been extremely bad on so many levels, but at least we've seen a lot of women leaders across the world finally getting some of the light they deserve, and I hope the recognition soon. I wanted to jump, and it's also an open conversation, so feel free to add to anything each of you is asking, and Andrea will forward me all of the questions. But Peneza, I wanted to ask you, because you were talking about political representation. What is the situation like in Tanzania right now? How many women are in power across the country? How hard is it to get to power? And if you want to, at the same time, give a few pieces of advice of how you managed to become a member of parliament, one as a woman, but also at such a young age and such a leader, I'm sure our community would greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, okay, thank you. First of all, as I said before, we do have the Constitution of United Republic of Tanzania, which gives a 30% representation of women in parliament. Now, the 30%, these are not women who have been directly voted for by the public. So after the elections, then parties are given numbers, or are given opportunity to send in names of women to be members of parliament. And this depends on the percentage that they got during the elections. So it depends on how the party performed, how many members of parliament they gained. Then now within that number, it is being shared among the political parties that managed to do well during the elections. So at least that helps to have a good number of women within the House. But if you're going to, in cases of the number of women who have been voted for, we have 264 200 constituencies, but we tend to have like 15 members of parliament, women, who have been actually directly voted for by the general public. So it's a low number of women if you compare to the number of men that actually managed to get into the House. And in the last election, it was so bad that in the opposition part, many women decided to run directly. And because of too much rigging that happened, maybe you read about in the Tanzanian elections, many women also lost because they were from the opposition. So many candidates that were for the opposition, they were women. But because of the too much rigging that happened and the election violence that happened, women lost the seats. So it is something that we need to push for. And it all happens with, because if we try to change the society, it may take time because of the patriarchy system. In other communities, they don't easily accept a woman to run. There are a lot of factors that are being considered. So there are matters whereby this can be actually stipulated by the law, and we can also change. Instead of women being appointed from the 30%, they can actually create a room like in Uganda, whereby they do have women representation, and they're actually directly being voted for by the public. And in that way, women can actually have their own seats. Then they can also vie in the seats where men vie. And in the process, that is just more or less an affirmative action in order to change the society, to see the examples of women who are actually participating, to see the way how women are representing. Then in the long run, then we can have a better environment where women can compete against men. And one other factor that is actually a challenge here, within the 30% of women that are being appointed for, these are positions that most women-wing political parties, they're actually being interfered by the men. So the quality of the women that are being appointed for to represent, they may not be the best quality that can actually help to change the perception within the public. So that is also one of the things why people within the community, and some members of parliament themselves as women, they want to be voted for. Let the public decide what kind of people they want to represent. Their quality will be determined by the people. And also we do have NGOs, we do have organizations that do help to train women. Too bad they come in a little bit late, close towards the elections. But these have to be ongoing processes. Myself, I'm being a mentor for a different group of young people who want to vie for positions in the next elections, how they can do it, how they can stay active within politics. That is very important. So there's much of the training which has to be done, but also at an individual level. If someone has an opportunity, either in politics or in some other field, it is important to be a mentor of others, to actually expose them a bit of what you're doing, expose them to different kind of environment, so that to have more women, because they have to learn from somebody else as we move forward. And from the speech, from the recording that we had earlier before this discussion, there's also a discussion among women about caregiving as it is, especially with the children, giving birth, getting married, getting in politics. That's a very big discussion when you're trying to talk to young people into politics. Oh, I have to get married first, have kids, then join in politics. So the most important thing is what you can do as women across with Tanzania and across is really trying to fight for spaces for women women to participate, yet their caring part is also being taken care of. Like for instance, like members of parliament, in terms of their schedule, how they can do their representation, and still they can have time to be parents and all that. Even in other fields, have regulations within various offices which support women and the caregiving part, which is very important, as well as support them to actually fully participate within building the organization or highly involved within the politics. But the most important thing of a woman to participate in politics is the decision, is someone to build up the confidence, is someone to build up the urge to want it. And if you want it to participate, find the little space that is there, grow from there, try to push as much as you can. The environment is not friendly, that's for sure, but fight as much as you can to make sure that you're heard and you're appreciated for what you can do, and not for how you look or the way how you are. Make sure you're being appreciated, but what you can deliver, what you can do, and what growth you can support within the political party and the government as well.
I mean, yeah, so many questions from what you just said. You touched on so many points. I couldn't agree more. I think I'm going to jump to Rabina in just a second, but I think those are some of the points we need to discuss here. One, before being able to run, we had such an event last year with Mrs. Pasaris from Kenya, who was explaining that for her, for example, one of the biggest barriers was access to funding for women to be able to run a campaign. And I myself run for elections, didn't get elected, but run. And one of the biggest barriers, access to funding. Like I couldn't get funding, whereas it's often much easier for male candidates. And then, of course, the laws, and there's so many examples across the world of what we can do to achieve parity in politics. And yes, it goes through positive discrimination at first, so we have a level playing field. And to then being able to support women, men alike in caregiving and working fully in society. I want to jump quickly to Rabina, and feel free, Rabina, as well, to jump on any of this. But Andrea is relaying some of the questions we're getting on Facebook. And one of them is, how did you find the courage to run for elections? I see so much discrimination and hate against women politicians. Something is depressing. So if you want to start, maybe Rabina, and then Upendo.
So when I started, it was in 2010, and I still remember I was expecting at the time, and I went and campaigned, and I campaigned very hard, and I stood in a area actually that had for a long time not been it had been in opposition, and so I campaigned and worked hard, and I still remember I met a group of men along the way, and they thought they had won it, the opposition, and they said to me, why don't you just go back home and just get a cup of tea and put your feet up, you're not going to win anyway. And they could see I was expecting as well. And I don't think they realized that she was going to actually go out and door knock. And the thing I did was I just door knocked, reached out, spoke to women. This was a particular ward that had not had a female representation for 20 years. And I took that ward from the male councillor at the time, and I won that just by 3 votes. The margin difference was just 3 votes. And that's over 10 years ago. And obviously, subsequently, I went on and stood in other elections. I came second against mainstream parties. And for me, it's about resilience and being able to move on and make sure you have that courage to do it. Along the way, yes, we do have problems. I mean, I've got 3 children. I had to manage things. I was expecting, and I still remember my son was born in November 2010, and I was sitting there going through council papers and trying to make sure that I could look after him, make sure the other my 2 daughters were looked after. They were going through, they were having their exams. It is a fine balance, and you have got to make sure that you have work and family life and politics all balanced up, and for your own emotional well-being. One of the things that I would like to touch upon is bias and stereotypes. Women often face that in the workplace or in politics as well. And I remember I had to make a presentation in the House of, in a parliamentary representation about the Olympic Games, that we were part of the host boroughs. And I went with the other leaders who had the same position as I did, and they were all white male politicians. And as we sat in the outside the office where we were going to make the representations, the clerk came out and he took all these white male politicians in and left me behind. He thought I was an aide to the white male politicians. And I sat there thinking, he's going to come back and he's going to have to take me. I'm not going to stand up and go out there and go out there and reach out to him. And he kept looking around, coming back, and then he looked at me, and you could see that he was very red-faced. He'd realised what he'd done. But the fact that I stood my ground and waited for him to come back, we just sometimes as women have to stand our ground and make sure that we can do that. It's really, really important. There are a few things that I've seen in the UK over the last the fights that we've had, the struggles that we've had in trying to fight for equality. And I've seen the progress that has gone on. I've talked about the suffragettes, the 1800s and 1900s, but in the 70s, it was a feminist move. It was about making sure equality, inclusion, and it was about influence. And then the 80s came, and there was a program called Fix the Woman. It was all about making the women, more confident, more out there, more vision, visibility. It was all about high heels. And then it moved on to men as allies. And that's really important. You cannot go out there without ensuring that men have to accept us as their equals, and that we also have a level playing field out there. And now we are living in a world that there's this expectation of inclusivity, and that is what we have to retain now. It's really hugely at risk at the moment, especially because of this global pandemic. We've got to make sure the struggles that we've had all these years, all these decades, we hold on to that expectation. The world has an expectation of inclusivity. We have a place and a role to play in that. Yes.
Beautifully said. Peneza, do you want to jump on any of this?
Yes, and it's good. It's good that such a question. It's a question. It's a common question, but it's something that I have lived in my life within my political time. And I joined politics at a very young age, just after high school. Just after my high school, I joined politics, and during that time, it was very hard for people to accept that this young woman is really interested in politics. Find me serious into the whole thing that I'm doing. So people are trying to sidelight me and all that. Then I just decided to take the volunteer path within my party and push and actually deliver on issues that I was given, or issues that I decided to do, because they would just put me aside, but I would push myself, get closer to them, and still do something then in order to be recognized for what I can do. So it's really hard. It could get abusive, yes. It could get hate, yes. But it's all about the persistence of what you really want. What do you want? What do you really want to achieve? And as it has been said by other people, and Elizabeth and others, that you don't feel inferior. You don't allow someone else to make you feel inferior. You have to allow them to feel inferior. So if you don't allow them to feel inferior, then you're not inferior yourself. Then you keep that energy that is very important for you to keep moving. But something that is also very important is finding the right people within the political space. There right men who will be able to support you, who will be able to help you grow. There will be the right women who help you to grow. So as you're trying to find your space, you're trying to find your way in, then you should identify the right people who can allow you to be a mentor, them to be your mentor. Find the right people who can help you to understand a few things, and make sure that you also find the right information to grow yourself as an individual. Because the environment is not very conducive, it's not very friendly, but you have to kick a few people, a little bit here and there, and push your way through. And I believe once you're there, then it's a story that actually helps other people who saw you while struggling. I'm right now in Liberia. I came. The former president of Liberia is my mentor, so I came to talk to her and all that. And today morning, she mentioned something. If you don't do it, if that's something you want to do, if you don't do it, then who else will do it? Sometimes you have to sacrifice for the things we want to see happening. We have to sacrifice for that. And if we do that, then we'll have other people to join us. But if there's something you feel like you have to do, then you're like, I don't think this is right, and you shy away. Then you're delaying change. You're delaying change that has to be seen within the community. So if you feel there's something that you have to do to impact positive change, then do it. At some point, maybe a little bit risky, like trying to fight for us in the African countries, leaders who are trying to behave in a dictatorship and all that, maybe a little bit risk, but find the right people who support you out of the country and inside the country, and move, because if you don't, then the whole country is falling. If you don't, then you won't achieve your dream. If you want, then you won't get to where you were. So it was a beautiful morning with a good inspiration that she said, then just do it. Just do it. It's risky, yes, but do it. And she is a person who has lived a great story as well. She lived in with dictatorship, military rule and all that. But she persevered, and at the end of the day, she became the president of Liberia. Thank you.
Yeah, she's also one of my personal heroes. I think something both of you touched on, and it's linked to a question we got on social media as well. You both mentioned the bit allies and mentorship. And this is something that always resonated incredibly well. As I mentioned, I run for elections at one point, and I didn't want to go into politics. I was too, I didn't have enough self-confidence to do it, and I felt completely inadequate. And the only reason for which I did is because a few allies, but mainly incredible women around me, also from other political parties, reached out and helped me. And they boosted my confidence. And they told me, look, you can do it. We stand by you. We'll help. We'll do whatever. Even if you run against them, they were like, this is about women. This is about you doing it. We're in this together. And I think what you mentioned, finding those people in some way or another in your corners. And it's in any field of society, if you want women leadership, it's finding a strong gang of strong women being willing to have you back and help you. And I think that's something that is extremely important to take away as well. We are stronger when we stand together. And so that's why I'm so happy to have you both from all corners of the world in this event today. And I'm going to this to what Andrea asked from someone on Instagram, I think. Do you manage, both of you, to bridge the political gap with women from other parties or sides of the political spectrum to work together for women's rights? So even if you are in total opposition on, let's take like the most extreme potential on an infrastructure project or a budget or whatever, are you able to come together beyond your political differences to ensure that more women come into politics so that women's rights are safeguarded? Whoever wants to start, go for it. I really don't have a preference.
Okay, I should say in my time in Parliament, I was much as I was a member of the Women Caucus, but I was the chairperson of the youth within the Parliament and the youth caucus within the Parliament, and trying to put the young people together to push for issues that youth issues, the youth agendas and stuff. I would say, and we managed to work together, and the area in which we work together is more of capacity building the capacity of members of Parliament, understanding the issues themselves, and being able to speak about the issues in Parliament. Build the capacity building, empowerment through other programs. That is basically about what we did. But in a part of our Parliament, the 3-whip rule, our people, the ruling party itself, the young people siding with the opposition on an issue within the Parliament, it's kind of a little bit tricky in terms of discussions, because they have to be given permission within their political parties and something like that. So we decided the way how we're going to do this is more of trying to the capacity building. Then we have people who speak about the same issue from the different parts of the political parties. But I have one experience. I had a private motion on the issue of sanitary pads, trying to help the young girls in school to be given sanitary pads, free sanitary pads from a lower level to at least or the ordinary level of school, so that we can be able to keep girls in school. Because we do register many girls in school, but they tend to drop out because of lack of essential products like sanitary pads. And as the motion was in the House, we had a bit of argument with the Speaker and all that, the motion to go in the House, but I was able to gain support from members of the ruling party, because I'm from the opposition, members of the ruling party, and they came out on social media supporting the motion. They came out on different platforms supporting the motion, speaking about it in the House. And we differed in a bit of approach, but they anyway spoke about it. The Speaker did not allow the motion to actually get in the House, but the kind of support that it gained, and these young people participated fully within the social media, and they were speaking about it in the House, it actually brought change. The government did not provide sanitary pads in schools for free, but at least they removed the taxes that were involved in the taxes on sanitary pads to make them a little bit cheaper. So it was a small achievement that is yet to be pushed for further action. But it is possible for them to work together. But it depends. There's a line that shouldn't be crossed within the political parties in terms of how our Parliament works. But like in an example I've given, we worked together, we did something important, and when you base on the most important thing, capacity building, help each other to have the right information, then you can have voices from various places and the government can act.
It's a beautiful example of cooperation. Rabina, do you have experience, or have you experienced women managing to reach across the aisle as well to be able to advance women's rights?
Yes, no. I mean, there are a few examples that come to my mind. I mean, I have to say it can be difficult when there's an opposition trying to make sure motion goes through, and there's a ruling group as well, because there's always that tension. But if you can find the level playing field and the balance, it's perfect. So one of the things that we did last year, as I work as an advisor in the House of Lords for the Liberal Democrats, is that Baroness Laurelie Burt's brought together cross-party to celebrate Women's International Women's Day, and it was the right to know, basically about the campaign to ensure that women in this country have the right to know how much they were being paid, and the right to know if they were being paid equally and fairly as to their male counterpart who was doing the same job. And that kind of activity is really, really profound. We've just had Caroline Pigeon, our GLA member in London from the Liberal Democrats, join together with Sean Berry from the Green Party to be able to work together on a motion. So when there is motions where it might not specifically be related to women, but it can still relate to women, people do come together. One example is a couple of years ago, I put forward an amendment to the lead member dealing with children's social services, and it was an amendment to make sure that a family, a foster family who had been demonised by a national paper, the motion was debated. It was the ruling party's motion, but I put this amendment in, and I remember writing this really, beseeching email saying, look at this amendment. We must do this amendment. We must make sure that we complain to the right processes, because this family had been demonized by this paper, this foster care family. And if we don't do this, then it will put foster care families off from ever fostering. And she was so good. She came back, we went to full council, and all she did was look at me and said, get up, do put your amendment forward. And it's in that spirit, when women do things together, you really feel as though this is the right thing. This is what politics should be about. Women, not oppressing women, but being able to do the right things together. And in the UK, I think there's 220 female MPs. There's 20,000 councillors in England. And only, I think, remember, I've got this figure down, 63% are male. 35% point something are female. That means 3 in 5 are male. There's so much work to be done. And that's why it's really important that women, when it comes to politics and making sure that we have candidates going forward, whether it's women only shortlist, it's important that they go through and that we are able to get as many women elected as possible.
So actually, I'm going to jump on this for 1 second and derail, because the first question I'm asked, only by men, obviously, but by men when talking about parity in politics is, but why is it needed? A good politician will be able to represent you just as fine. So Rabina, in 1 sentence, so 2 sentences, why do we need parity in politics?
We need parity in politics because women have always had to struggle to make sure that they get where they get to. And we cannot do that without men understanding where we've come from. Our history is unique. Men, you are our allies, not our opposition. And the rise of women is not the fall of men.
Here, here. And Peneza, why do we need parity in politics, according to you?
We need parity because we need women at the table to make the decisions. Because there are a lot of issues that do touch women's lives, and in every aspect they touch women's lives. But it's the women leaders, when they're equipped with the right information, they can actually fight for the women's side within such decisions that have been made on agriculture, on water, and all that. And doing that is actually you're helping the community to grow. When when there's a voice of women who are speaking for the lives of the women and the general public, then you're pushing development at a higher speed. So I think women are very important to be at the table, at the decision making. Women are very important, much as they're doing all the hard work down there. Then they should be supported so that they can be at the table on the decision making processes. Thank you.
Amazing. So next time I get an annoying comment like this, I'll cut out this part of the conversation and we'll just send it to people to make it faster. So here's the answer from 2 trailblazing politicians. Just check it out and learn from it. So I still have 500 questions for you, but we have 10 minutes. So let me try to bring it back to the future. And to bring it back to the future, we have to consider the impacts of COVID-19, obviously. COVID-19 across the world have brought back women's rights decades, according to certain studies. We've seen a rise in domestic abuse. We've seen a rise in unequal salaries. We've seen a rise in women being forced out of work slowly but steadily, etc. I'm an optimist. I have hope for the future when I look at women like you and women around me who are fighting for a better world. For you, where do we start? How do we start rebuilding a more fair world post-COVID? How do we use this experience of this last year that has been extremely tough to put equality back on top of the agenda and make sure that we don't wait 300, 200 years to reach full equality across the world, but that we reach it now for our generation? Maybe we can start with Peneza this time.
Okay. The issue of COVID with March, you said we start with Rabina? I'm sorry. Are we starting with Rabina?
No, start.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. She came on my screen. I thought she was speaking. Okay, fine. Okay. I'm sorry. Okay. The issue of COVID has disadvantaged many women. But as we're moving forward, we're seeing a lot of initiatives that are being done to bring the world back to its normal. So then, and what we should actually be looking for is the opportunities that are being present, that are helping the world to come to normal. They should also be available for the women. In our countries that have not yet decided yet if they're receiving the vaccines or not, if they're available, then women should actually also be considered and being given a priority as the rest of the population, not to be left aside, for them to equally participate. And something else, it is all in the budget processes. There's a lot of stimulus budgets that have been made. There's a lot of money that the government is setting aside for various projects and all that. Then women should also be present and should also be considered equally. And if we do that, which means we'll be pushing the whole community at par. We'll be pushing the whole community towards healing and change and positive change after COVID. But if we do a discriminatory kind of way of distributing funds, a discriminatory way of helping do various projects, and which means we're taking women and the society back. So in order to push for a positive change and impactful life after COVID, then women have to be considered, and men, and the funds that are available, opportunities that are there for healing, they should be accessible to all and they should be given to all. Thanks.
Hi. What do you think? How do we build a better, more equal world once this pandemic is behind us one day?
I think 2020 has been a year that I won't forget so easily, or in generations to come. We saw in 2020 the way COVID impacted on people around, not just in the UK, but around the world. And in the UK, we saw that COVID impacted and affected people from Black and Asian and ethnic minority communities. BAME community members were twice as likely to die from the pandemic and the COVID environment and the things that and the virus, the COVID virus, and in particular, women were affected. So if you recall, when the nurseries and schools were partially closed, you will see that often it would have been the women at home trying to make sure that their children were being able to be educated online. For so many women, they either had to go part-time or even have to leave their jobs. And let's not also forget that during lockdown, women, there were women who were self-isolating, often with abusive partners. That domestic violence was a huge impact on women. You will see women who also took responsibility of either caring for, not just for whether it was paid or unpaid caring for someone who's a neighbour or a sick relative during that period. That's an additional emotional burden on a woman. And women, as I said earlier, were at the front line of the care industry, the NHS that we have. We have hundreds and thousands of nurses who are so, predominantly women, who have only just recently, by our Prime Minister, been given a 1% pay rise, which I think is unacceptable. And that's something that we will be fighting for in the future. So I say to you now that if we are going to go forward, we cannot lose what we have struggled for. And the first thing is act now. And when I say act now, to all those organisations out there, if you want to make sure that women are supported, make sure that you promote them, you hire them, you retain them, and you make sure that women are not left behind in this COVID environment, whether you are an organisation, whether you are a government. And it starts from now, from an immediate pay rise in our country to the NHS.
Beautiful. And I think it also starts by including women in every one of the discussions, as you both mentioned before. If we rebuild, women need to be part of the conversation. And to close this really interesting event, and again, I'm really sorry we only have 1 hour because I could go on forever. I wanted to end on an optimistic note, because I think especially in the midst of this pandemic, we often look at all of those figures that are dramatic and heartbreaking and extremely concerning. And a lot of people think that International Women's Day is needed because the situation is so dramatic in many respects, and I agree. But for me personally, International Women's Day is also a huge celebration. I love it. It's my favorite day of the year. I think it's an incredible day to actually look at all of our achievements and to celebrate women across the world that are working for a better world, and are often not considered as much by society, by history books, and so on. So I love to celebrate women on this day and our achievements. So here's my question to both of you. Looking at 2021, what gives you hope for women's rights? And second, who are the leaders, women leaders, because today is about women, who inspire you and that you would like to point people to? They can be in the political realm, in the literature world, in any space of society, but women that should be recognized for their contribution to women's rights and to the feminist struggle. And Rabina, maybe you can get us started on this one. I know it's a tough question, but it's to end on a happy note and to bring up other women in the discussion.
I think I'm always reminded of Eleanor Roosevelt. She once said, do what your heart tells you. You'll be criticized anyway. You'll be damned if you do and damned if you don't. And sometimes politics is like that. And I'm always reminded of her words. And so the people who have inspired me in 2020 in terms of women isn't just politicians, actually. It's the ordinary women who have gone out there, those unsung heroes. We never talk about them. They never come to the table. They are there, and they will become invisible if we, as politicians in power, do not hold them up on our shoulders. To those invisible women out there, those women who are voiceless, those women who can't be at the table of decision making, who struggle every day, but have been there during that pandemic period, quietly making sure that we are looked after, our families being fed, holding someone's hand and making sure a loved one who's about to pass away, to be able to be there with that person, the nurses, the GPs, the healthcare sectors, the social workers, the person who up my road often comes down and checks people are okay. Those invisible women who we don't talk about, who aren't even around this Facebook page, they should be celebrated, and it is to them that I look to for inspiration. That's what I think.
No, I couldn't agree more. What about you, Peneza? Who do you look to for inspiration, and what are your hopes and dreams? And you can tell us the craziest ones for 2021.
Thank you. I should say I truly appreciate women who are taking chances, women who are taking the spaces, and women in the community who are actually forming groups for change for their own lives, but also for change within their communities. But I should also appreciate the wonderful women in politics who are doing a lot. And previously we had Hillary Clinton running as a president for the United States. She didn't make it, but this time around there's a vice president, a woman. Those are things that actually you see changing, and things that even impact people. if people see such changes, then those are changes that touch people's hearts and minds, and they open the possibility of having more women into the spaces of power. In my country, we also have a vice president, a woman. And I also truly appreciate women who are going through a lot, to actually make a change and impact in their lives. The leader of Manyoma, the lady, she has been held by the military, what the community is doing for her, but the chances that she took, those are people that you see and you're like, why should I shy away? Why should I feel like I can't do it? They give us the reason to move on. You get to the story of my Helen Salif, and you see, like, she went through a lot. She went through hell, and you've not even gone through even 15% of what she has gone through. Then why give up? There's a reason to move on. There is a reason to push for, and we're not doing this just for ourselves, but we're doing this for the community, changing it for the better, for a better future, for better of our children, and for the better of the well-being of the world.
Thank you for this inspiration and inspirational words to end this event. I think something that kept on coming up throughout was the need for action, both from allies, so men mainly, to actually stand by women, support women, make sure, my main thing is make sure you don't actually take women's space in the first place, and don't get overpaid and so on. It's not a man's world, it should be an equal world. And the need to act at whatever level of society you want to work out, in whichever sphere of society. We have two incredible politicians here, so politics is accessible and is feasible. Find yourself a group of badass women ready to support you and go for it. But if you can't, as Peneza said, form local groups, fight for your rights. We heard also from Rabina about women who managed to get higher compensation that they deserved after going through it and challenging the system's decision. So change is possible, but it is dependent on all of us to take action at our individual levels. And I would like to close this event by thanking all of the incredible women leaders we have at Now. And this is something that I'm very, very, very proud of. It's Parity, as you can see, is one of my favorite concepts and the battle that I want to drive forward in my life. And we have absolute parity in our movement, including in leadership positions. And across the world, we see so many women, and I see some of them actually on the Zoom call and some of them on social media right now, that are taking to the streets every single day, whether it's to fight against climate change, or for parity in politics, or for a fair distribution of vaccines. And then we also see the incredible people, whether men, other genders, and so on, that are standing by them, supporting them, bringing them up, and so on. So it's a bit of a selfish conclusion, but I wanted to thank the incredible movement that is supporting this event as well, and saying thank you. We appreciate you, and you rock. This is not a very formal way of ending it, but we should celebrate all of those activists on the front lines fighting for our common rights. Thank you, Rabina. Thank you, Peneza, for this event. And it was a pleasure to connect. I'm so thrilled that you're supporting our women's rights campaign, and I'm sure we'll get to collaborate some more in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Colombi. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.